Welcome to Caregivers and Candid Conversation podcast. I am Lashina McBride, the host and the executive director of We Support Caregivers Incorporated. We Support Caregivers is a 501c3 organization whose mission is to encourage and empower individuals who care for their elderly loved ones to cultivate and focus on self-care. To make a donation or to learn more about us, please visit WeSupportCaregivers.org. And caregivers, while you're on our website, be sure to check out everything that we've made available to you. From our Care Connection emails that you can subscribe to, from our self-care support text that you can join, from our self-care support kits that you can sign up to possibly receive one, the birthday club, our free educational resources, and more. Again, visit WeSupportCaregivers.org and check all these resources that are available to you, the caregiver. Hey everyone, do you know that We Support Caregivers has sponsorship opportunities? What a great opportunity to support the community and promote your business at the same time. We Support Caregivers offer sponsorship levels which include individual, small business, entrepreneurs, and corporate sponsorships. Our sponsorship packages are loaded with benefits for each sponsorship level. Some benefits include getting featured in our Care Connections newsletter, to a 60-second commercial airing during our podcast episodes. There is something for everyone. Are you interested? Visit WeSupportCaregivers.org to fill out the sponsorship interest form. Remember, your donations and contributions help us continue to help other people. We Support Caregivers Incorporated because caregivers deserve self-care.
We all know that social media is full of information, but you have to keep scrolling to find what pertains to you. Well, caregivers, did you know that you can have your information about what we offer to caregivers delivered straight to your email? We Support Caregivers has created a newsletter just for you titled The Care Connection. It's delivered to your inbox once a month. Caregivers, stay connected and stay in the know by going to our website at www.wesupportcaregivers.org and sign up today. Let us support you on your caregiving journey. We support caregivers because caregivers deserve self-care.
Welcome to another Caregivers and Candid Conversation podcast. It is me, your host, Lashina Renee McBride. And today we have with us none other than our executive secretary, Miss Celeste Wooten, in the studio today. So how are you, Celeste?
I am good, Lashina. I am so honored and thrilled to talk about something that our community doesn't like to talk about, and that's grief.
Right.
So
that's what we're discussing during this podcast, grief. Just grief in general, what it looks like, what is grief. So I'm going to let Celeste introduce herself. We do know her. She's our faithful, loyal, she's not only the executive secretary, but she's been a fan of We Support Caregivers for the longest before she became a part of it. So just knowing how she rocked the brand and supported us before, becoming a board member, I was comfortable reaching out to her, asking her to take a position because she was already for us without actually being a part of us. So I'm glad that she came alongside of us and, is a part of our team, helping us move forth and grow. But there's way much more to her now. Hold on a minute. Let's not get it confused or twisted. Okay? There's a whole lot more to her. So I'm going to allow her to share, just other things and how her other roles and how it pertains to grief. And we're going to go into the podcast and move into our grief conversation. So go ahead, Celeste, let them know, more about you. Other than being just the executive secretary here, you are also a
I am a certified grief coach. I also am an end of life doula, where I can work with families once they get the prognosis for hospice, which is what I also do during my day job. I'm a certified hospice and palliative nursing assistant. So
Yes.
what I've done is, with that role, I have branched off and earned other certifications to learn how to help our families.
Yes.
Because while they are caregivers, and once that role of a caregiver ends, they still need a little help. And so I kind of, help guide families to let them know that it's okay to not be okay.
Yes. So I would say my first question, or just to lead us into the podcast, tell us in a nutshell, because we hear different variations of what grief is, but tell us in a nutshell, what is grief?
I would say in a nutshell, grief is a loss of anything. It
Yes.
could be a person, a pet, a job, a relationship. It could actually be the loss of yourself.
Yes. Wow.
You can grieve yourself. You've lost yourself. And that is something that caregivers actually end up doing.
Yes.
They lose themselves.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
So,
yes.
like I said, in a nutshell, grief is just the loss of something. So we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Okay. So grief. I like how you said, that was really profound. Just your simple definition, but it was also profound because a lot of times we associate grief with just death of people.
Right.
But honey, divorce can be a grief, especially if you're
absolutely.
the one who didn't file for it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Losing a job after 20 years, that is something to grieve about.
Right.
The house a person lived in, burning down, living in it after 15.
It's whatever you've lost.
That's right, whatever you lost.
Then like you said, it may not be a person.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be a death of a person.
Right.
But it's the grief of whatever it is that's gone from you, that you no longer have access to. And again, that could even be yourself. You may not even have access to yourself anymore.
Right. And you know what? I'm glad that you expounded on that, because caregivers, that it's grief, and the part of it can be anger too, because you no longer have your life as it once was.
That's right.
So the grief of losing your life as you were used to having it.
That's right.
That's grieving. It's like, so how should caregivers, when you're now the caregiver, so now what? You're the caregiver, your life is not any longer the way it used to be. How do they deal with the grief of losing their life as it was, and now taking on the role and being very present of being the caregiver now?
Well, as a caregiver, your grief journey actually starts that day.
Mm-hmm.
Because you are trying to figure out how to take care of yourself or your family plus your loved one. So your journey actually starts that day. And I would tell people, when that starts, you have to take the time to figure out, you may not be able to run out and go get your nails done every week.
There you go.
But guess what? You could take 15 or 30 minutes at your own home and maybe do a little nail filing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes that grief journey starts with what I say is the new you, the new adjustment.
Okay.
So you're grieving what you've lost, because you can't do the Starbucks runs all the time and stuff like that. But you are having a new adjustment.
Okay.
And so when you start that new adjustment, your attitude's going to change a little bit.
That's true.
Some resentment may start creeping
That's
up.
True.
And, and you have to learn ways of self-care to adapt to that new journey.
Right.
And whatever that may look like for you, if that's just 10, 15 minutes a day of woosah because of what's going on, or just getting away and understanding that, you know what, I've been given this job to do, and I got to figure out how to still do that but my life is a little bit different now. How do I adjust to that? And you do have that grief. You have that you get angry.
Yeah.
Because what you're so used to doing, and you can't do that anymore.
Right.
You know.
So I would say basically what you're saying is you're going to go through an adjustment period. They have to go through an adjustment period. And during that adjustment period, I would say find what is good about the situation, what is joyful about the situation. It might take you a little time. It might take you a little bit of time or a lot of bit of time.
Right. And it's almost like it's a mourning period.
Yeah, you're mourning. That's it.
It's a mourning period. Just like when somebody passes.
There you go.
And you have that mourning period.
There you go.
You're starting your mourning period a little bit earlier because you're mourning what you're either about to lose, what you've already lost.
There you go.
And now you got to adjust your life to that.
And that can be.
And that mourning period can last for a little while.
Right. Oh, yeah. Because and I would say as the days go by, you realize this is my new normal now. This is my new normal. But that's what it is. They're mourning the loss of their life, mourning the loss of themselves, and what they were used to. Mm-hmm. So I would say allow yourself to mourn, but you still got to get adjusted to the new norm.
Right. And don't feel guilty about the mourning.
There you go.
Do not feel guilty about it because one, you're still human, and two, it is an adjustment. I don't care how old you are or how long you've been out of your parents' home. It's an adjustment for anybody. Yeah. And do not feel guilty for any kind of emotions that come up.
There you go.
Because again, a mourning period, all kind of emotions start happening.
Yeah.
It's life. It happens.
Right.
So don't feel guilty about that.
So what I want to know is, or maybe somebody listening, what does grief look like? Like sometimes, and I'm going to tell you for me, what my mom was the first death I ever experienced. Mm-hmm. But for me, grieving wasn't crying, being balled up in a ball. Grieving wasn't crying and being balled up in a corner in a ball. That wasn't my grief. And I would say the reason why my grief wasn't that way is because I grieved her when she was living, because I watched the transition. I watched her decline.
Right.
So when she was alive but not really living because of the limitations and the things she couldn't do, just because it was all related to her health, I grieved during the process of taking care of her. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So my grief didn't and I said this on other podcasts before. I said when my mom died, it was a relief and a release.
That's right.
So grief for me didn't look like the stereotypical grief. Mm-hmm. So my question is, what does grief have a look? What are the different types of grief? But before you do that, does grief have a certain look? Because I think sometimes people think grief should look a certain way. And I also believe sometimes people get judged because they don't grieve according to the stereotype of how it should look. There you go. So go ahead. I'm going to let you elaborate on that.
To me, grief is however you think it should be.
Okay.
Because there's no picture. There's no, we don't have pictures that say this is what you should look like when you grieve. But society feels like you should be, strewn out on the floor and hollering, and some people may do that. I'm not judging.
Oh, absolutely.
But that does not qualify to everybody. I know me personally. I've lost my father and I lost my father-in-law. And grief for me was with my own father. I saw him in the hospital. I didn't cry. Went to his funeral. I didn't cry. Grief didn't hit me until maybe 3 or 4 months later. My grief manifested itself in my health.
Okay.
I got sick because I wasn't releasing it. It started shutting my body down.
Wow.
So grief manifested itself in my health.
Okay.
Sometimes grief manifests itself for people mentally. Like their anxiety and their depression can just really get out of control. And they may not understand, like, what is happening to me? So, they don't think, oh, I'm sad because I miss, it can really play with you. Wow. And like I said, I'm speaking from experience with the health thing. I mean, it was wreaking havoc. Wow. And, a lot of people don't think that grief can do that to you. No, grief can put you down.
Wow.
And, some people, think that, it's a bad thing to say, you know what, today is a bad day. I just, everybody feels like you should be smiling and, that whole your loved one's in a better place. No, please don't say that. Because one, that person may feel like, no, that person's supposed to be here with me.
Right.
That person may be angry. And everybody's grief journey is different.
Right.
Whereas, you may want to cry a lot. Well, I may want to just laugh and giggle and remember the memories, and everybody looking at me like, what's wrong with you? Didn't you just lose somebody?
Right.
So everybody's grief is going to be different in how it manifests itself because we're all different.
I like it.
And as a society, people think the death, the funeral, the burial, you get back to life. And it's not the case for some people.
Right.
I know, with me, I'm still on my grief journey.
Right.
And so for me, I work on myself physically to help my mental, to help my emotional. That's how I deal with my grief. So I tell people all the time, I'm like, grief has no
look,
color, no nothing. It is whatever you feel. Grief is whatever you feel it is.
Okay. Let's clear up, because you touched on it. Let's clear up the phases you shouldn't say when someone is grieving.
Yes, Lord.
The phases you shouldn't, the phrases you shouldn't say when someone is grieving.
They're in a better place.
Mm-hmm.
Not being funny, but how do you know where they at?
Okay.
Depending on their spirit, how do you know where they went?
That's true.
Oh, you know what I'm saying?
That's a whole nother podcast for another day.
And then, I don't like for people to say, I know how you feel.
Do you?
Because I lost someone too. I shared with a lady the other day that I was speaking with, and she expressed that she was missing a loved one. Mm-hmm. And I let her talk. And I said, I'm going to say this to you. And I wanted to explain why I'm saying it. And I said, I am not going to tell you I know how you feel. She said, well, you do. You lost someone too. I said, but I don't know how you feel.
Right.
I said, so here's what I'm going to say to you. I hold space for your feelings. I validate your feelings, and I support your feelings. And she looked at me and she says, I have never heard anybody say that to me. She's like, I always hear, I know how you feel. I lost my mom, such and such and such and such. You don't know how someone feels. Right. Because it's totally different,
right.
Because again, everybody's grief journey is unique to them.
Right.
I don't like for people to say, well, it'll get better with time. No, not necessarily. It's not that it gets better with time. You just learn to live with your new normal without your loved one.
Yeah.
It doesn't make the wound go away. It doesn't make the hurt go away. You just learn to live with it. You learn to progress with it. Mm-hmm. You're moving forward in life with it. Mm-hmm. So I just tell people to please be cognizant of what you say, because you never want to diminish somebody's grief journey and throw yourself into it when it don't have nothing to do with you.
Right. So listen, let me stop right here. Okay. I have to honestly say, and I heard Devon Franklin say this, because how the divorce he and Megan.
Right.
he said he had to allow himself to feel his pain. I thought, and it triggered like, okay, so in this moment, right, even though someone has to progress through grief, that's not numbing yourself. How can someone progress through the grief without it getting to the point of them numbing how they feel, like they're just getting numb? Like, they have to be aware. They have to be aware of how they feel to be present with the pain, because that's they're navigating through it. But they need to navigate through it and not numb themselves to it.
Right.
So how do they do that? Like, how do you? Okay, so your mom died. You still got to get back to your life, but you still, it's still fresh. But you don't want someone to keep moving forward and not feel the pain. But they need to feel the pain and not be consumed by it to the point where they can't move forward. Well, you don't want someone to become numb. How they balance all that out?
I have always said, sit in your feelings.
There you go.
Sit in them. They're gonna hurt. It's gonna feel awful, but don't live in them.
There you go. Okay.
You got to sit in them, and that was a hard thing. I had to sit in my emotions, and my emotions ran from mad to, some days I was good and I run back to mad, but I had to learn how to live with it. And it's there's no magic number of how long it should take you. Because again, if you're just numbing it and it comes back up again, you don't know how hard that trigger is going to be, what that trigger is going to do to you. And I always say to people when they ask me, like, well, how long should it be before, I start feeling normal again? And I'm like, well, what's normal to you? Your normal is going to change a little bit. And I always say, if you feel like you need to go talk to someone,
there you go.
Please do. Please do.
Right.
Go talk to a professional. It's not going to make you look crazy. It is not going to make you
They need help processing it.
Yeah, you need help to process what you're feeling, because one, if you can't figure out how to start that daily progression a little bit, and I'm not saying you're supposed to, bury your loved one and on the next day you're supposed to be on the road to recovery. No, it doesn't work like that.
Right.
Because again, grief is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And you just, that baton passing, those are milestones. Learning to live with it. Okay, that's milestone number 1. Number 2, getting back out there and starting to live a little bit, do your activities a little different without your loved one. That's milestone number 2. Baton number 2. It's a marathon. You're just going to keep going.
Okay. You said if someone's struggling with not pretty much moving forward, like moving along, that they should seek someone.
Right.
When should someone, if someone is able to realize, because it might be another family member or somebody else who realized, hey, ever since dad died, so-and-so haven't been the same. If a person realized that, what would be some things that you might need to notify a professional about, or start seeking a professional grief therapist or something like that? Like, what would be some signs, like if they're doing things that are unhealthy or like toxic, or like just what?
Not eating.
Okay.
Not wanting to get up out of the bed.
Okay.
Not showering.
Okay.
Just even your normal basic things. It's normal to not want to do those things the first couple of days after it's happened. But if it's a lingering and you're seeing it week after week, and they're not wanting to eat, they're not wanting to do anything, they don't want to talk it to anybody, and it's an ongoing pattern, then yes, I would say you might want to possibly seek out some, additional help, because the process, you just need a little guidance, a little hand holding.
The process and the grief, and managing the grief and
right, because some
processing
people,
your pain
it's hard,
and your feelings and getting your emotions off. Okay.
Especially if you've been a caregiver for a very long time to someone, and now all of a sudden that role is no more needed, and that's what you gave your life to. And, depending on if there was any trauma related to that grief and caregiving, and it's so many factors related. It can pile up. And again, it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to reach out to somebody.
Right. So let me ask you this. Okay. And I'm not going to say his name. I'm going to talk about it. So we know a certain male celebrity who's been going around fathering a lot of children.
Yes.
Okay. So now looking back, he was married to a celebrity, high-profile singer.
Mm-hmm.
For a few years, she ended up getting a divorce from him. Okay, that is trauma. That is grief.
Mm-hmm.
Then, a few years later, he fathers a child, but ended up losing that child as the child was an infant.
Mm-hmm.
More grief. Do you think grief can manifest by having that being promiscuous?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Can that be a way a person?
Because you're looking for that. You're looking for that love. You're looking for that belonging to somebody. You're looking for that momentary of somebody needs me in that moment.
Yeah. And that's the way I look at that particular person. I prayed for him, but I really believe when you look back, because he really was in love with that woman. He was in love with that woman, honey.
Mm-hmm.
And next thing you know, years go by and boom, she filed for a divorce. Okay, I believe that with that, and then he ended up losing a child later on.
Right.
I think all that triggered. And I really believe that him going around fathering a lot of children, that being promiscuous like that, I really believe that's a part of how his grief is manifesting. That doesn't mean we condone that type of behavior.
Right.
But I'm talking about the grief, and looking at, just going back some, and who knows of other things that he experienced, trauma, losses, what have you, could trigger that type of, or grief can be manifested in that type of way.
Absolutely. Grief can be manifested in someone, I've seen it personally, where grief was manifested in someone just spending money like crazy.
Oh yeah.
Because, they were just not thinking, and they were just mad at the world, and they were buying stuff, and I'm like, what's happening? And that was a manifestation of grief, and she eventually found that out because she sought help, and she started telling, what she was doing, and that was her grief. And she was like, I don't need none of this stuff. Well, come to find out, everything that she was buying was related to the person that passed.
Look at that, how the grief manifested.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Everything that she bought was related to the person that passed.
Wow. That's amazing. So you being a grief coach, explain what that is and where your role is in the journey of helping someone navigate grief or, get through it.
With a grief coach, I allow people to talk with me about what's going on. I remind them that I'm not a counselor. I am not a therapist. So I just kind of gauge to see where their grief is. We do some exercises to kind of help them navigate their new normal. But I am also trained to recognize trigger words, trigger phrases. And after a couple of sessions of talking with them, or if it's a family, I can, recommend that they do seek out additional help from someone who is a counselor or a therapist. But a lot of the times it's just having someone that they want to talk to validate what they're feeling, to validate that they did a good job by their loved one, and to really just to say that they're not crazy for feeling the way that they feel. Because, again, you get some children who tell their parents, well, we're going to take care of you. Dad is good now, and you don't have to worry about that. But you don't understand the dynamics. They might have been married 50 some years.
Wow.
You have the child and the parent dynamic, but they had the spouse dynamic. They were Mr. and Mrs. before they became parents.
That's right.
So the dynamics is different. So sometimes it's I've had, couples where they've lost the spouse, and, the children don't understand that. And sometimes the spouse that's left behind, they just need somebody to validate the fact that their grief is different from their child's grief.
Got it.
So it's just helping them navigate and recognize, if any additional help is needed. I do exercises with them. Mm-hmm. I recommend books that they can use. There's a couple of books that I use as resources. So I'm really there to be a sounding board.
Okay.
Really. And just, letting them know that there's a person that has no, relationship to the situation, and that I'm there to just listen and do what I can. So
you provide a safe space for them, a neutral ground,
right,
no judgment zone.
None.
Okay. So Celeste, tell us how many stages of grief that there may be, what they may look like, so someone or maybe someone around the person who is grieving can identify the stages, and what, or maybe, you tell them what the stages are, a person can kind of know what to expect. But if you can go in and let us know what the different phases or stages of grief are, and maybe an example of what that could look like for someone.
Okay, so there's actually 5 stages of grief. So the first one is denial.
Okay.
Which is, it's a normal reaction to rationalize the overwhelming emotions that you start experiencing as soon as that grief starts up. You're like, you don't want to talk about it. It ain't, nothing's real. It'll be all right. I'm good. You just, I'm fine. I'm fine. That's the famous phrase. I'm fine.
So that's what
you're just denying everything that's going on. So it's a defense mechanism, and it buffers the shock of the loss.
Okay.
So, and then you have the second phase, which is the anger phase, and that is as the numbing effects of the denial starts to wear off.
Here comes anger.
Here it comes. the pain of the loss starts welling up in you, and you're like, you know what? You're mad at the world. You're looking for people to start blaming. I know I personally, when my father passed away, I was blaming the doctors. I was blaming the techs. I was blaming everybody. Y'all let my daddy die, but there was nothing that they could do. And it wasn't their fault.
Right.
But I was looking for someone to pin that anger on, because they were the closest things around when my dad died. So they were about to catch it for me, unfortunately. So then the third one becomes the bargaining.
Bargaining.
Well,
what is
which
that?
is the what if stage of grief. And it serves an important purpose to the stages of grief.
Okay.
Because it provides a temporary escape. From the pain.
Okay.
It provides hope from it. And then it gives a person time to adjust to the reality. So you're bargaining okay, maybe. And what if, and you just, it takes you out of the anger, the being mad, because you just start bargaining stuff, Then, unfortunately, the stage number 4 is depression. Which, that is a word that we all hear.
Yeah.
But this type of depression is not a sign of mental illness.
Okay.
I know that, depression is a big word for for right now, but it is an appropriate response for someone who's experienced a great loss.
Okay.
To get depressed.
So it's kind of natural.
It's a natural depression. If you can think of it that way, it's a natural depression.
Okay.
You might experience intense sadness. You're not sleeping as well. you don't want to eat, and you get a loss of motivation. It's common. But like we were saying a little while ago, if that starts to linger, and it just keeps going and going, and you're noticing that, you just don't want to do anything. It's almost like you just gave up on everything. You gave up on life. You need to really possibly go seek help.
Okay.
And then finally, the last stage, which is stage number 5, which is acceptance. You accept the loss. You accept the fact that your loved one is no longer with you, and that there's nothing you can do to change it. And number 5 takes a little while to get to, because, and it's not saying that you're okay with the loss.
Right.
You're just accepting the fact that they're gone.
Correct.
You're not okay with it.
Right.
But you're accepting the fact that they're gone.
So let me ask you this. Does any of those stages have a period? Like, what if somebody's staying in anger stage for 3 years? Or what if somebody's staying in denial stage for 5? Is there a limit per stage? Should it be alarming if someone stayed in a stage long other than the depression stage? Should it be alarming? Like,
I would say everybody's different.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's grief is unique, like a fingerprint.
So even the different stages. So
even in the different stages, if you're noticing, again, because if you're noticing you're just having a hard time accepting what has happened, you're mad at the world, and again, that natural depression is starting to become a little bit more intense. Seek therapy. And I mean, again, I know people that are grieving someone 5 years, but they still know they're living their life. They're just still missing the person.
They're functioning.
So that grief is, they've gone through the stages, but they're still missing the person, and it still hurts. I mean, I know people that's been missing somebody 20 years. It still hurts.
All right, let me ask you this. So, how do I want to put this? What if someone is grieving and it's more so coming from a guilty place? Like, they know they weren't good to their mom or their dad. They know they weren't that child that was there. They know they said some harsh things. Like, talk to that person right now. Talk to that could actually been a caregiver who may not, did the best job at caregiving. They didn't know how to, or, they just feel guilt. Talk to that person right now that is struggling. They're grieving, but it's more so from a place of guilt. And they can tell you, I didn't do this and I should have. I didn't, you know what I mean? I don't know if that fits in one of those phases that you just listed, but it could be somebody that is grieving along with being guilty. What would you say to that person?
With that person, I would say, one, thank you for recognizing that.
Yeah. Okay.
At least thank you for recognizing that that you might not have done everything. That you might have had some resentment, and you didn't do your caregiving, duties, that you thought you should. And I commend you for recognizing that. But I think sometimes if that guilt is so overwhelming and so powerful, you may need someone to speak about. Because until you can release that guilt, it's going to take you a minute to truly be able to grieve the way you need to without that guilt.
Because would you say that the guilt is like a buffer or a filter?
Yes, I would say the guilt is like a filter, because you're not really grieving. You're feeling in your feelings. You're like, man, I didn't do this, that, and the other. Well, how can you grieve? Because you're feeling a little ashamed or embarrassed that you didn't do X, Y, Z. So that sometimes that might be, the filter for the grief. So I would say,
like a delay in true grieving.
Yeah, I would say you need to find someone that you trust, that you could talk to, and relinquish that guilt, so that the grief can finally start happening, and then you can work on, letting it go. Yeah,
going through the phases and stuff. Well, I really thank you, Celeste, for making the time to share all this information. I'm sure it's valuable to anyone who listens, but definitely our caregivers, because here's what we're not going to be able to avoid: the death, the transition. Like, the person that you're taking care of, you're not going to always take care of. Like, mine might have been as long, like when I was taking care of my mom, and I started around the age of 19, my journey was a long journey with her. It was a long journey with her. But that's not going to be the case for everybody. Right. And still, short or long, we're going to have to go through grief. So I would say, from what you confirmed or what I've learned, grief does not have a look, a color. Grief doesn't even have a time frame.
Nope.
Grief looks different for everyone. It's just allowing yourself to grieve. Allow yourself to feel the pain. Allow yourself to be in tune to your emotions so you can navigate that grief process, that grief journey.
Exactly.
So I do appreciate you coming, explaining, providing knowledge, education about grief, sharing what your role is as a grief coach. I appreciate you. And of course, I appreciate everything that you do here at We Support Caregivers. You make my role as executive director a lot easy and smoother, just because your willingness and your willing spirit to want to help and volunteer to do this. And, I appreciate you. I really, really do. Now the public knows how much I appreciate you. Whoever listening knows.
Thank you.
And you and the rest of the team, like, I appreciate you ladies, what you do, what you bring. So I'm thankful and I'm blessed to have you on, We Support Caregivers, our team.
Thank you.
So we appreciate Celeste. And that's going to be the end of our podcast. Make sure you stay tuned to listen to Caregivers and Candid Conversation podcast right here on We Support Caregivers Incorporated.
What does self-care look like to you? Does it look like meditation or journaling? Does it look like putting on your comfiest outfit or having a dance break? Does it maybe even look like listening to a podcast, going for a walk, spending time with family and friends? Self-care can look different for each person, but we would like to share some starting points with you. You can go to our website at www.wesupportcaregivers.org and sign up for our self-care support kit. We choose a deserving caregiver each month to send these intentional items to support your self-care development. We support caregivers because caregivers deserve self-care.
Entrepreneurs, content creation should never be your concern. Socially Established LLC is a social media management business whose mission is to alleviate entrepreneurs and small business owners from managing their social media. Socially Established LLC offers content creation and social media management packages for your convenience. Remember, you were never meant to manage everything on your own. Visit sociallyestablished.com to choose your service package today. Socially Established LLC, establishing what entrepreneurs need.
We all know that social media is full of information, but you have to keep scrolling to find what pertains to you. Well, caregivers, did you know that you can have your information about what we offer to caregivers delivered straight to your email? We Support Caregivers has created a newsletter just for you titled The Care Connection. It's delivered to your inbox once a month. Caregivers, stay connected and stay in the know by going to our website at www.wesupportcaregivers.org and sign up today. Let us support you on your caregiving journey. We support caregivers because caregivers deserve self-care.